Okay, guys, I wanted to give you an update on this tabletopper that I've been working on. It is the homespun woven fabric called Autumn Spice that I ordered on Amazon. I've linked it in one video, and I'll try to remember to link it below in this video. So this one I decided to do very rustic. It has the ticking on the back. It's kind of a burgundy ticking on a off-white background. Again, an Amazon purchase. I don't get out much during this pandemic. And by the way, before I forget, today is October 20th of 2020. So there we are with that. But anyway, so I have a piece of Warm and Natural in the middle here. And then my ticking, and these squares I just stitched together using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And I realize that they look wonky, and that's because they were not cut. There's no possible way that you could, even if I used this square and its mate right here, there's no way that I could possibly match these up and have them be squared up. So it is very random, very rustic, and I quite like it. And then I'm just doing 2 strands of a creamy floss color. I'm just going around the inside of each square. And then once I get that done, I will do a straight binding. I'm not doing mitered corners on my rustic tabletoppers. I just kind of think that just takes a little bit away from the rusticness of what I'm doing. I do not store this with the hoop on, and in fact when I do these side pieces, like even as close as this right here, these two, I'm doing it without a hoop. I did kind of get off a little bit. I had to pull some stitches because I was following this green line, and I actually just need to come straight down from the top. I'm looking for my ruler real quick. Here it is. So I'm just going to draw kind of a helpful line there. And I may do that on a few of these, just simply because my eye wants to follow the print, but in fact I don't want that to be in line with that print, because the print is askew. So it needs to come straight down and go straight across, like that. And I'll tell you, the thing about this is I grew up watching, well, I didn't grow up watching, but I was pretty young. I was young married when Little House on the Prairie television show with Michael Landon and Melissa Gilbert and all those individuals came on television. And I'm trying to think of his name. He was like their friend, and he kind of rescued them, and he was this big burly mountain guy. I can't think of his name, but anyway, he used to wear like a shirt or a jacket or something that had, it seemed like a lot of these prints, and every time I look at this, I just get slammed right back to the early 80s, when I think that show was on in the early 80s. Maybe it started in the late 70s, I don't know. Okay, so I just wanted to show you, this is what I've been doing for the ones that I'm not putting in the hoop. Get you backed up where you can kind of see. So this right here is the one that I'm working on. And I will tell you, I'm using a rather large needle because it just does not want to go through the the 3 thicknesses if I don't use a rather large needle. It's kind of crazy. Okay, so yesterday, this was the project at hand, and I didn't show that in the video that I uploaded and edited today. This right here I did not show, because, oh my goodness. So here's what I need to do. I'm going to remove all of this. So I just went to town and I stitched and I stitched and I stitched. So it all has to come off, which is fairly easy to do. I don't mind reverse stitching. It doesn't upset me like it does some. But I have since figured out how to make this binding work the way I wanted it to look. So once I get all the stitches pulled and the binding off, I'm probably going to need to cut 2 new pieces. 2 of the pieces are going to work just fine, and 2 of the other pieces are not going to. They will be too short, because I'm going to need an overhang on all 4 sides of 1 inch. That is why I did not show this in the video. I didn't want you to cut or trim your binding pieces too small. But now that you know that the pieces that you're going to be using for binding should all be cut 1 inch on each side longer. So basically 2 inches longer than the width or length of your project. Now, if you want to wait before you do that to see, make sure that this is the look you want, then of course hang tight. I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to remove all of this and get these guys resituated. Come back. I'll go ahead and cut the additional 2 pieces that I'm going to need. I will need to cut this piece across the bottom and the matching across the top, because I can use these pieces that I have here for the 2 sides. They'll be long enough that I can adjust that so that I have 2 inches extra on each of those. And good thing I have extra fabric. And then I'm going to show you the neat little trick. I'll show you when I come back. Alright, there and there. And then if I open this up, I have 1 inch on this side. Well, I couldn't ask for better than that. So just cut it in half, and I have a strip for the top and a strip for the bottom. Okay, so I am now good to go. Oh, or I'll drop them on the floor. That's always a good idea. All right. I am still pulling some of the thread from the previous stitches out on both the tabletopper and these little pieces of seersucker, and that's one of those things that happens when you have to remove some stitches. So I think I'll go ahead and clean up the edges, and when I come back I'm going to show you how, yeah, this has got to be cleaned up, but I'll show you how to set up your binding. So we definitely want to have a finished edge to flip to the back. So go ahead, if you're following along, and press your strips in half long ways, like so. I do recommend that you use a heated iron to do that, so get them all folded in half. And instead of leaving you hanging and wondering why do I need to do that, I'll show you just quickly in a little sub example. So we're going to take both of the raw edges on the folded piece and put them on the raw edge of our tabletopper and stitch. Then we're going to fold this over the top, and as you can see, this now becomes a finished edge right here that we can stitch down. There isn't a raw edge that we would need to deal with at that point. So all of these need to be folded in half and pressed. I do need to heat up my iron. And then we're going to do two opposite sides at a time. So we'll put one on this far side over here and then one on the other side over here. So these two opposite sides, we will have our short pieces. They need to oppose each other. So you could turn it and do the long side if that's what you want to do first. And I'll see you when I come back. I did want to recommend, if you're using a lightweight fabric like I am, that seersucker is fairly lightweight, you might want to go ahead and use a starch. I'm using Mary Ellen's Best Press. This is a non-sponsored, no affiliation product. I just happened to order it and I really like it. And I can just go ahead and say, I give it, you know, it has a high rating in my sewing room, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I'll probably buy it again. So anyway, and the Rose Garden scent smells so good. Okay, so with all of this pressed, and I also want to mention something about pressing. If you're going to use a starch product, like spray starch, if you're going to use a spray starch, go ahead and spray everything that you're going to be pressing and allow the starch to set into the fibers before you hit it with the heat from the iron. Because if you spritz it and then you hit it with the iron, it just sort of dissipates and it doesn't really, I mean, you'll get some benefit from it, but if you allow that starch to settle into the fiber of your fabric, you'll be surprised at the difference, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You'll notice a difference. Alright, so now I am pinning. I know I said I was going to do the short sides, and for some reason I just immediately started pinning the long side. So I guess I've sort of changed my mind without realizing that I changed my mind. And I'll just go ahead and do these two first. Alright. Once we have these pinned on, and make sure you're pinning it so that you've got that extra inch off of the edge on both sides. You can see that. I'm not pinning it in, but, and there is, you know, some value in that, because as you're sewing you can just pull these out this way, but as I'm sewing I can pull them out the other way. And I'll tell you why I pin them the way that I do. If I'm going to accidentally run over a pin with my sewing machine, which I really don't want to, and it's been a long time, knock on wood, since I've done that, chances are the sewing machine needle will skiff off of the pin and jump over it. So I might not break my sewing machine needle or damage my sewing machine. I am less likely to have contact with the pin. There's not as much, you know, surface. If I'm sewing along and my pen just happens to be, or my sewing machine needle just happens to be running along that pen, I could really do some damage. So this is just, for me, it's the way that I just feel more comfortable pinning. I could use clips, which are also an option in this project, but the next step here is to stitch this down and then to stitch the other side down. I will go ahead, take care of that. When I come back, these two will be stitched down, and then we're going to add these, and you'll see why it's important that we have that added inch. Alright, so as you can see, these two have been attached. So what you do next seems a little counterintuitive, but it's really the only way that this can be done. Now I know a lot of people out there would prefer to use a ruler and a rotary cutter. The reason I'm not is I'm afraid that I will make a mistake. So I'm going to use my scissors, and I'm going to cut this little tail that is along the edge. I'm going to cut that off even with my project. You want to make sure that you're not cutting it into that project space. If for any reason you're afraid that you're going to do that, then I would use a rotary cutter and a ruler, and basically just, let me see if I can find my ruler. What the heck did I do? Oh, here it is. You know, just make sure it's nice and flat, and then put this right across there and cut that off. I'm just more comfortable with scissors. And especially in the second part of this process, I find that scissors are definitely, for me, the better option. So I'm going to keep my eye on this little spot right here and cut. And I prefer to cut just a little bit, you know, past my sewn project. It won't hurt anything. You don't want all that bulk, but you definitely don't want to cut, you know, too far in. And I also haven't stitched this all the way down. I started stitching, oh, I don't know, about 5/8 of it, well, maybe about an inch. No, about 5/8 of an inch from the end. Okay, now I'm going to turn it around, do the other side, like so. I do want to smooth it out. I don't want wrinkles or bumps or anything to affect the size of what I am, currently working on. This is shredding on me a little bit because I've worked on it a little bit much. Okay, so now I'm just going to gently, carefully trim that away, like so, and do the same thing on the lower edge. I'm also, in case you didn't notice, I'm also trimming out some of the whiskers, the little fibers of fabric, trying to keep some of that to a minimum. It's really helping my voice. I did not want to take Benadryl yesterday or anything like Benadryl. I just, gosh, sometimes my allergies just go through the roof. Yesterday was a bad day for that. Okay. So, and fabric fiber can do that to me. So, that's why I was having such a hard time. Alright, so now that we have trimmed these edges off, we're going to open this out and press these out using our iron. I'll be right back. Well, so absolutely totally forgot. So this piece right here has to extend past this once these have been pressed out. So I'm going to put like a little thing at the front part of all of this that says, don't cut out your fabric because she's being weird again. So the way this goes is you need to cut 2 pieces of binding first. Apply 2 pieces of binding opposite of each other first. Then cut the second 2 pieces once you have pressed this binding out this way. Then take a measurement. You need for this second piece, I mean, it can be longer than an inch past your your project, but that's kind of, if you have it, the width of your fabric or something, that's kind of a waste. So an inch past is plenty, but it has to be an inch past the pressed out pieces, not prior to pressing out, okay? So however wide your binding is going to determine how far out the second 2 pieces of binding will be, how big they'll be. So that's the way I'm going to write it in my sewing journal and remember it moving forward. After I got these on and pressed them out, I was like, whoa, these 2 little pieces that I cut are not going to fit. Oh, that's right. So I had to cut 2 more and starch them and iron them and prepare them for this. So now that these 2 have been pressed out, applied and pressed out, I can now take my second 2 pieces of binding that are the same width, folded in half, pressed, and now I'm going to measure where to cut. This needs to extend at least an inch on each side. So I'll cut this here like so, and now I'm going to pin it across the top. that is pinned on, and I'm going to go ahead and stitch it down. So when I come back, I'll show you next step, and I'll finish off the second side on the other end of my table runner. Alright, so I have stitched this short edge of the binding onto the short edge of my table topper. And as you can see, it is extending past this point. So, again, if you want to use a rotary cutter and a clear ruler to cut this off right there, go ahead, but however, do not cut this folded edge with your rotary cutter. I think that would be easy to do. I mean, I'm not going to do it, but if I put this here, because this has to be cut off even with this, I might accidentally skiff it with my blade, and I don't want to do that. So I'm not planning to do that. I'm going to use my scissors. I also have some loose threads that I need to remove. So I'm going to cut those off. Okay. And cut the extra fabric away from and off of this edge, just like that. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side, because as you can see, it also has that little extra tail of fabric that needs to be removed. And I also have thread that I need to snip carefully. Okay. All right. So once again, I'm going to carefully cut this little extra piece. I want to make sure that this is nice and flat. The next step, of course, would be to press this edge down. But I wanted to discuss the next step. So if you're taking notes and writing stuff down or trying to remember it, using some type of memory trick, the first two that you put on, so for me it would be these two long pieces, are the first two that get folded toward the back to be stitched. And the reason for that is you have a raw edge right here. So when I fold back this first one that I put on, like so, that raw edge will be folded into this one. Then I come back after I've stitched this one down and the other one, and I fold this down, and now my raw edge is encased. It's kind of self-covered up. So this is what it will look like when I'm all done and I have done my little applique stitch. And I do plan to stitch this by hand. You could stitch this on the sewing machine if that's how you want to do it. I am going to do it by hand. I don't want my stitches to be, my sewing machine stitches to be visible. I feel like I have a lot of stitches with the quilting stitches on the back and the quilting stitches on the front. So I'm going to go ahead and just do an applique stitch as I'm applying these two. So the next thing I need to do is the last piece of binding trim. I think it would be real cute and a great way to practice if you wanted to do something like this on a smaller scale as a pot holder. and it would be a great way to practice, you know, these square binding steps. There's so many times when I think square binding is absolutely precious, adorable. One of the great things about it is if you have some wide, you know, like 2-inch wide ribbon, you can do it, you know, you can kind of have a nice little square binding with your ribbon. And you can kind of cheat if you're wrapping up a package. You can kind of do the same thing using tape on a package, which I think is kind of cool. Okay, I'll be back in a minute. Got this one stitched on. I'm going to go ahead and remove the excess fabric and of course the threads that just seem to follow me everywhere. Okay, all right, so carefully, I do think that if you do it from the reverse side of your project, you might have a little bit better luck because you can see what you're getting into here. I really don't want to cut this, and I'm kind of nervous about cutting it. So if you just open this out like I've done here, I don't know if this is, you know, if it's showing up well in this weird light. So this is how it was, like this. And if I could cut this folded edge. Excuse me, and I don't want to cut the folded edge. I mean, it would just really, it would take away so much from the project. So just flip this one out like this. You still run the risk of cutting into the fold if you're using a rotary cutter and a ruler. You could still cut it with scissors, but I think the chances of doing that are a lot less if you're careful with scissors. So I'm just going to go right along this edge using great care and caution. Okay, so there's that. I'm going to also clip some of these little fuzzies. Okay, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing to the other side. And remember, the two short ends are the last two that I did. So they are the last two that will get applique stitched to the back. Right. Oh, goodness me. Alright. So I have this flipped out. I can see where this side one is. I need to trim off this little tail without cutting into my folded edge. So I'm going to carefully just do that. So now I have a raw edge on this short piece and a raw edge over here. And the same thing is true on the bottom. I have two short pieces that have a raw edge on each side. I do need to go press these flat. So I'm going to go take care of that, and then I'll review the entire process so that you will have something to reference should you decide you want to do a square edge binding. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back, and here it is, ready to be hand stitched. So as I've said, I'm going to go over all of the steps up to this point. So you have your tabletopper or pot holder, whatever baby quilt that you want to do a square edge binding all the way around, which is perfect. So what you'll need to do is cut 2 pieces of binding to twice the width that you want and 2 inches longer than the very edges of 2 pieces, 2 sides, or two of the opposing sides of your project. So a long edge and the opposing long edge. So those will need to be twice as wide and 2 inches longer than this whatever project is that you're working on. You will fold these in half long way, press them down so that they are now half the original width, but they are the same length that they were when you cut them out. And they each will be 1 inch off of the edge of your project. So 1 inch off of this side and 1 inch off of this side. So 1 and 1. And then you will stitch that down and then press it over. So stitch and then press it over. And then you'll do the same thing on the other side. Then you will cut that extra inch of fabric off. Up at the top, you'll cut that extra inch off. Okay? Then once these are pressed out away from your project and hiding that raw edge, then you will get ready to cut out the other two sides, very opposite of each other, so the top and the bottom. So this one and the one way up there are now ready to be measured and cut. Of course, they would be the same width, which is double the width that you want, because when you fold it in half, you lose half. And then you're going to cut the length 1 inch out on each side, or 2 inches longer than the full measurement. And you're going to stitch it right on top of the first ones that you put down. So you'll put it down, it'll be out here, you know, an extra inch over here. So I have an extra inch of this sticking out, and you're going to stitch it down and then fold it out and then trim off those extra inches. So that's where we are. Oh, and then press these out as well. And that is where we are right now. So you have a raw edge on 2 of the pieces, and in my case I have an exposed raw edge here and here and here and here. That's an exposed raw edge. This is folded. This is a raw edge. So in order to make this pretty and a true square edge binding, I must take the first 2 sides that I did, not these short edges that I did just last, but these long edges that I did first, and fold that down just like so, and pin it into place. And that's what that looks like. Stitch it down all the way over it, even in here, in this little spot right here. Just go ahead and stitch it down. You don't want to go through, so be careful not to have, you know, like a really clashy thread, but just kind of carefully stitch that down, or you could even glue it. I mean, that might be a better option, is to just use some Elmer's glue, a glue stick or something, just to kind of hold it in place, okay? And both sides. And then turn it around and do the other side. So we're going to flip this over, and we're going to fold this, and we're going to pin this one down. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, it is a little bit more difficult. I've got a folded piece of fabric, so that's 2 layers. And then I've got this layer, a layer of Warm and Natural, and then my quilted layer on the front. So my pins are, they're not too thrilled with me right now. Okay, so if you have followed me up to this point with this project, we've got the two that I did first, the two long sides. And I know I keep repeating myself, but I know if I hear something over and over again, it tends to stick. So the two sides that I sewed down first, and they have to be opposite of each other. That's one of the rules. So you can't stitch this and then stitch this and then stitch that and then stitch this. This project won't work in this way. Now, my brain can't wrap around doing it like that, so I don't know if it would work. I'm imagining that you would end up with a mess. And if you wouldn't end up with a mess, I know I would. So the rule is you do these two sides and then these two sides. And then when you're at this stage, you do these two sides. Now this must be stitched down first, and that must be stitched down second. Once those are stitched, then you can take the number 3 and number 4 that you did, and you've got these stitched down, and probably these little ends are either stitched or glued, and you're going to flip this way. Now all of a sudden what you have is this raw edge that you had to leave is now enclosed in your folded over edge. And I'm going to clip this because now I've got 2 more layers, and it's a lot of layers to hold with a pin. Okay, so there's that. All the way across, and when you get to the other side, exactly the same thing is going to happen. You're going to get over here and you'll see you have to get this up here. That's why I want it glued or stitched. I don't want you to be fighting this. That would be a nightmare. But if this is either glued down or stitched down, it would be easy to just fold it over, clip it, or if you have some Superman pins that won't stab you and will go straight through all these layers, pins are fine. Okay, and then when you turn this over, just look how pretty. I mean, it's a nice example of a square. I'm going to try to get it where you can see a square edge binding. And for me, it looks good on both this side and the other side. And of course, it'll look a lot better once it's stitched down. Now, one really cute idea that I kind of dreamed up last night when I was trying to figure out how to do this was, if you wanted to, before you do any of this stitching business, you could do a cute little embroidery on the front side of this right here, the half that gets folded over, and you would have on the other side an adorable little embroidery edge, which makes this side a unique side as well. I would love to be able to do it on a different one, and I'm already kind of thinking Christmas would be so cute if you took you know, just some Christmas fabric, some white fabric, and then did a jelly roll in Christmas fabrics, and then your binding was in the white. But before you did this, if you went along and like embroidered little Christmas trees, or just maybe a vine with red and green, or silver, or blue and silver, or gold and red, or however you wanted to do it, I think it would just be adorable. And then for Halloween, you could put little pumpkins, and then on this side it could be for Thanksgiving, so that Halloween, you have this on your tabletop, and then, you know, you got the little pumpkins embroidered around the edges. And then at Thanksgiving, you flip it over, and it's a beautiful Thanksgiving fabric. Actually, it'd just be perfect. So, I'm going to write that in my sewing journal as well. But anyway, so I have it all pinned and clipped, and I'm so happy with it. I'm so happy that that awful, horrible, terrible mistake happened. And that is one of the best lessons. If I were teaching again, this is what I would definitely, in the classroom, if I were teaching in the classroom again, this would be one of the best lessons right here. I cut these off. I was a little irritated with the fact that it happened in the first place, but I can't possibly complain with the outcome. Plus all of the additional thought processes with the embroidery and the ideas for the holidays and birthdays and gifts, people who mean something to you. You know, you could do an embroidery on the back that says, I love you, and then you could have that person's name. Or you could do little paw prints. I swear, you could make this into a pet water dish, you know, mat to keep your floor, if you've got hardwood floors, or carpet or whatever. And then you could do like little puppy prints. There's so many things. So anyway, I hope that this was inspiring. I hope that if you have something like this sitting around, you'll take another look at it and come up with your own great, wonderful, fabulous idea. I know that all of you have the capacity. You are wonderful, and I appreciate every single one of my dandelions beyond words. It's just, it has to be said. So anyway, I hope you have a fantastic day. I hope that wherever you are, it's sunny and that you're able to enjoy what it is that you enjoy doing. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye.